Hi everyone, this is Mehul Mehta and welcome back to my YouTube channel. So today we have a very special guest. We have Dimitri Bianco. So first of all, thank you Dimitri for joining in today.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for having me.
So today, in this podcast, the idea is like Dimitri is organizing a Quant conference, and there are a bunch of speakers who are in top of their profession who will be coming in the conference. So so the idea is to help you all understand what you can expect out of the conference. So I'll pass on to Dimitri if he can share, what the conference is all about and who are the speakers and how can students and professionals, can benefit out of the conference.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for having me. So I'm really excited. So this technically started 2 years ago. I posted on YouTube. So I had a YouTube channel, right? And I'm like, if anybody wants to just meet up at a Starbucks at this location at this Saturday on this time, meet me there. I'll just be there drinking coffee. And I think 15 to 20, maybe 15 people, like 10 to 15 people show up. And it was an interesting mix of practitioners doing like quantum mechanics for finance. I had no idea. And then we had some students from UT Austin, which is like a 3 hour, 3.5 hour drive that came. And there were students from around the Dallas area and some professionals. And it was just a really fun, like quaint meeting of like, hey, let's just sit and chat and learn about the industry and everybody else.
Right.
And then the second year I started working at Agora Data, they said, no, 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 don't do a coffee meetup again this year. Just do a full-blown conference.
Cool.
And I'm like, I don't know, like that's a lot of work. So we ended up doing it last year. I think we had 47 people attend that signed up. Then we had the Agora staff to add on top of that. So we're like at 50 something in total. A great speaker list last year. Um, just really interesting topics, things I had never even done. Like we had somebody talking about NLP, so shout out to Bennett, talking about it. I think he has like a master's in linguistics from MIT. So
Cool.
doesn't even have like in my mind, right? Every quant has quantitative finance background. And then he's like off in this whole other space talking about like language and the nuances of language. And it was very interesting. And there's like Mehul was talking, I think, about quantum applications at FMI Technologies, and they have an office in Dallas, which I had no idea because their main office, I think, is like in New York City. But it turned out to be this really fun, kind of quaint gathering of just a bunch of students, practitioners, a couple academics as well, and everybody had a good time. But then we surveyed everybody, and the biggest complaint was there was no networking,
Mm.
which I get, right? I mean, I've been to the conferences, and it's like, how I don't know how many conferences you've been to, but it's always like you go and then the speaker speaks and you sit and you listen, you take notes. And then I'm like, should I ask him a few questions after the presentation? And then I ask him a few, and then it's like everyone just kind of like goes their own way and you never see anyone again. So this year in this conference, we're trying to make it even better. So we've got a networking event at the end. And so I'm hoping that will give more time to really meet the speakers and talk to the speakers, as well as networking. Because like last year, I was slammed. So I met everybody for like 2 to 3 minutes and then did selfies. And by the end of the day, I was so tired from running around making sure the photographers were lined out. Security and staff was handled. People are getting checked in, making sure like no one's stuck outside. Because like the worst thing is like you buy the ticket, you show up, and then you're like, I can't find the ticket or something happened. So that was last year. And so this year I think is going to be a lot bigger. I think last year we had 5 or 6 people presenting, and then one was a panel. This year we have 3 tracks, and I believe like 22 or 24 speakers.
Whoa, that's huge. That's huge. Yeah.
So it kind of blew up, I think, quickly over the last couple of years from like a quick coffee meetup to really ramping up. I was going to share, let me share my screen. So I have an amazing marketing team at Agora Data, and they do lots of fun stuff that I just can't do and don't have the skills to do. Um, but they have this awesome website they built for me.
Mhm.
So this is the theme this year. It's the Quaint Quant Conference. They have an official logo, which we're going to use going forward now, and they've bought the domain and everything. But this year we did a little things differently we teamed up with UTD JSOM, which is the Jindal School of Management. So I don't know if you've been to the other conferences or not, but like I always loved going to like Columbia or Cornell or Princeton just because it feels, I don't know, like more like professional and like, I don't know, academic-y when you're there versus like going to an office place or like a Starbucks. So we teamed up with them this year. I've been a supporter. I'm on the board of their FinTech Masters, but I'm teamed up with their finance lab as well this year. So it's pretty exciting. We're gonna have a great area and stage setup. So my favorite spot to speak there is this really big wood stage in the auditorium. I think it fits like 320 people. So
Mhm.
that'll be a pretty good discussion point. But I was going to go through just kind of the event quickly and then go through some of the speakers, including yourself. So I was very excited that you wanted to come on and join.
Yeah.
Um, but for those of you interested, it is April 18th. It is in Dallas, Texas. It's technically Richardson, which is like a sub area of Dallas, at UTD, so University of Texas, Dallas. Tickets for students are $30. Students have asked, I don't care where you're a student from, just a student is fine. Just bring an ID or something to show you're a student. And then it's 70 for practitioners. I was looking at a few other conferences, and we have intentionally kept the price as low as possible to cover like the cost of lunch and parking, and the breakfast and all these sorts of things we have to pay for in maintenance fees. But I think like GARP was like 350 or $400 for early bird tickets, which I don't know. I have a hard time doing that unless I can get my company to pay for it. So I try to make this at least reasonable for students and practitioners if you're just wanting to come. But let me just hit the speaker list here because I think we have an amazing list of speakers. Many of these I know personally as well, which is pretty cool. I guess we can go through this. We can go to the agenda. That's probably a better way to go through this. So it'll kick off at 9 a.m. There's a bunch of presentations from our chief operating officer at Agora, the dean at UTD, JSOM, and then myself. But so we're going to have the track set up with two presentations going in classrooms and then one for a panel discussion.
Okay.
The partial moments one. So I don't know Fred well, but he offered to come out and he published a research paper and it's on partial moments, which is very exciting for me because I've been working a lot in that space here. But he's going to be pretty awesome. Again, he's going to be also on, which I'll show later down, a fintech panel as well, which we have some pretty cool discussions there. But this is nonlinear statistics, numerical analysis, machine learning. I think this is going to be a pretty good one. The next one that's running at the same time is a goose.
Yeah.
So you know a goose.
Yeah. He's really famous in our community. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure. I messaged him and I was like, "Hey, can you come out?" And he's like, "Let me message you back. I'm in Japan and Indonesia this week."
Uh,
So
so
yeah,
is he joining? Is he joining for the
yeah,
conference?
he's going to be presenting. So he has a new software. I think it's called Modeva. I don't know. Have you seen it or no?
No, not really.
Okay, so he has a whole new explainable system coming out. It's a download package. I've been meaning to download it for a while. I got early access to it and I haven't had time. But it's adding explainable pieces into the machine learning space. And I believe that's what he's going to be presenting on. Um, he is super, super famous, head of validation a couple years ago at Wells Fargo and built that from, I think, like 2010 when all that started off. But yeah, global speaker, travels around. But I met him at American Bankers Association, oh man, probably 6 or 7 years ago.
Yeah.
And he knew one of my colleagues. And so I've had a great contact with him. He's always been real supportive. So I'm excited to have him come. But again, it'll be a lot of insights on the machine learning space and the finance kind of sector. There's going to be a panel for banking.
Mhm.
So part of this is I want to bring together all the pieces, right? Because in the quant space, there's the sell side with the banks, then
Right.
there's like the investing side, which is completely different. And then you have the fintech people who are more like techies, but they kind of do finance and you have the different edges.
Mhm.
And then you have students and academics. So we're trying to get, at least this is my goal, is to get enough interesting presentations and panels so that no matter which area you're coming from, it would be a good opportunity to come and network and also learn about different parts, but more specifically have things that are tailored to the practitioner or to the sell side or to students or whoever's going to be coming.
Mhm.
But we're going to do a panel discussing banking. So Ching Chao Li, I mentioned in the past, was an old colleague of mine at Santander, specializing in the credit space, worked at I think, Bank of America in the past, has a PhD in forestry,
Oh.
which is very different.
That's correct.
And then we have John Dravenstadt, I believe coming from Key Bank here. So this will be another expert. I think working like on a mix of credit and market risk over the years. So I think it'll be kind of a good blend there. And then Joe Yang, who works at Agora Data now, but I used to work with him at Santander as well. So I'm trying to get this panel discussion to talk more about the banking space. So I was always lucky enough to get invited to go to the ABA events, the American Bankers Association, and everybody was very open and very willing to talk about like the issues and things that are going on. And then oddly enough, like when I would try to get people just to talk about it openly, it seems like nobody wants to talk about the issues
Right.
unless you're at the conference, like you're in your own space.
Right.
So I'm hoping this will be kind of eye-opening for practitioners that are not in the banking side, but also for bankers to actually talk about like how are you validating these? Like this is my question. How are they validating if they're using LLMs?
Yeah.
I don't know if you've worked in that space or not.
Not really on LLMs, but I know like it's really challenging to validate all those stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm like I want to know like what are the banks doing? So that would be a great panel to kind of bring that together.
Mhm.
Um, a colleague of mine, so I published a paper, I don't know, at the end of December, something like that, on kurtosis conjecture, on using kurtosis to identify over and underfitting within machine learning models. Should be able to be applied to stats models, everything else. But my colleague, Devashi Galati, actually did like real testing. So mine's just a conjecture. Like this is what I think. So she actually went out and did research on this, given she has a PhD. So she's really diving into that. She has an awesome paper being put together, but she hasn't published it. But she'll present that there. So if anyone's in the machine learning space, I think it'll be an interesting presentation. And then SAR. So SAR is awesome. I don't. He typically presents at the Princeton conference, which is where I've met him at. But if you are on the computer science side and you're running parallel computing, so running multiple sets of code simultaneously, he works at Morgan Stanley and it runs this big project that runs all of the models in parallel.
Mhm.
And so I've seen his presentation before. It's pretty cool. But essentially, it's how do you do it without having to ruin all of your code and rewrite everything? Because
Mhm.
as you know, it's such a pain if you have to do that. And so you have to bring in a lot of computer scientists, but he has a great presentation on that and kind of the system they use and how they run it all, which is pretty interesting. And then the panel at that time is going to be the fintech world. So this one's a cool one. This one's the one I really want to attend as well. So Fred Boyle is going to be speaking. Billy Madaker is from Bertram Capital, which is out of California. They invest in a variety of companies. He was like a head data scientist and has an amazing career kind of in actually Silicon Valley in that space. They're actually down in California. So really cool background there. And then of course Christina Chi, which I think most people know, Forbes 30 under 30, ran a hedge fund, CEO of Data Bento, um, goes to lots and lots of conferences as well. I always like seeing her. So they're going to be talking, I think, more about the fintech space. So for students and even practitioners, right? Like I was so stuck in banking for so long that it
Right.
was really hard to make that leap of like, do I really want to leave the comfortable banks?
Right.
It, it yeah,
Also,
go ahead.
Definitely, like because a lot of students, I wanted to understand from a student perspective, right? Because a lot of conferences, you see a lot of students attending those conferences, but like in the head of a student, they always feel like, will it be worth paying, let's say, X amount of dollar? So let's say for this conference, it's really cheap, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you see, if you compare this with other conferences, those are really expensive. But like, what do you think? Like, I mean, how beneficial this something like this will be for students who plan to, because there are a lot of students who are confused whether to attend it or not to attend it. And like, if you can give some highlight on those, like, what do you think, how
Yeah.
can student community be benefited?
Yeah, it's a great question. I spent a lot of time thinking about this when I put this together. So I think there's a couple aspects that it will benefit.
Mhm.
One being looking at the different areas of quant finance you're probably not going to get exposure to. So
Right.
I have rarely ever been to a student conference, one of the students at it, that covers banking. Like
Mm.
I've been to Cornell's, I've been to Columbia's, I've been to Princeton's, and every conference talks about hedge funds, investing, everything's on the buy side. So this I think will open that opportunity. It'll also open the fintech space, and you can ask like what are quants actually doing in the fintech world, which I think is probably a little bit different than what we do at the banks. There's not as much regulation around it. So one of that is going to just be kind of seeing different opportunities you probably didn't see before. I'm actually hand messaging PhD students in math and stats departments around Texas and some other closer areas to that point of trying to show them like there's another career path or another opportunity that you perhaps haven't seen. That's the first piece.
Right.
The second piece of this is going to be just the networking piece of this.
Mhm.
So when you look at the lineups and the panels, some of these people, like a Goose and Christina, you'll see at a bunch of other conferences, which is awesome because they're top notch. But at the same time, you're also going to see a bunch of people that you've never seen.
Mhm.
So like Billy and Fred here, I haven't seen them at any other conferences. They work in adjacent spaces in fintech. So I think for students, it would be a good opportunity to kind of network between practitioners and other students. So I'm hoping other students will get together and figure out where you're from and what you're studying and what you're doing. And then the third piece is, of course, career development, right? And I don't think I've ever seen this at another conference. So it's always research conference. It's usually just research conference. There's nothing else going on at these conferences. Um, and so when you dive into this, go down just a little bit further. Let's see, just make sure. So we have the career panel,
Mhm.
which I thought would be interesting. So Zach Cretan has been on the podcast, my podcast. He's a recruiter that specializes in the quant space in Dallas, Fort Worth area.
Mhm.
So for students that are saying, "Hey, I want a job. I'm also going to apply to New York City, but there's a big job market in Dallas, and almost nobody knows Dallas that well because none of us talk." Zach's the guy to go to. Like he finds my hires for me here. And it's also, I think, opens the opportunity of jobs in Dallas.
Mhm.
Because right, you always think about like New York, Chicago, but
Right.
nobody thinks about going to like North Carolina or Dallas or somewhere else where banks are at. Um, I'm gonna butcher these names. Shambhavi actually has an engineering background from undergrad, and then decided she wanted to make that transition into financial engineering and went to Rutgers Quant Finance Masters. So I think her perspective will be useful for those that are undergrads
Mhm.
of like, I'm in math background, engineering background. How do you make that transition? How do you get into grad school and land that job? She'll be awesome for that. Dr. Logan Song works at UTD on the AI space as well. So looking at this more from, I guess, kind of more like a cutting edge academic stance on that.
Right.
And then Patrick Zorro, as you know, Patrick, the director of Lehigh's program as well. We had a long discussion in a podcast. Oh man, it's been probably like a month or two about how do you place students, right? And he's struggling with that. Like, where do you place the students? How do you best prepare them? So I think he's going to be a great piece as well to kind of give kind of the challenges with it, right? Because as a student, it's hard finding a job, and he's trying to place those students. I think he'll be a good aspect on it as well. Also, again, if you're looking to go for a master's, he would be a great person to talk to because
Yeah.
he runs a program and he does all the admittance and all that.
Right.
We have your presentation. I'm hoping this is up to date, the website. Here, crafting a powerful resume standing out in quant finance and risk interviews. So again, right, this is why I was really excited because I'm like, I want to add a career portion to this, and we always do a career panel. But I'm so excited you contacted me because I want someone that can help them write resumes, help them talk about the interviews, right? How do you strengthen your profile to be prepared for the job market if you're a master's student? But more importantly, I think to take this a little bit further, I think a lot of us end up like 5 years into a career,
Mhm.
and it's like you went to grad school, you applied for the job, and you got the job. And then you kind of worked and you maybe jumped to a firm or two, but then you feel stuck,
Right.
right? But then it's like, who's writing their resume every 2 to 5 years, right? Like I never did. So like when I wanted a new opportunity and people weren't just giving me job opportunities, I had to really sit down, even like building the YouTube channel and go back and be like, all right, how do I write the resume? And oddly enough, I was going back to my old videos from like 3 or 5 years later, 3 years later, whatever. And I'm like watching my old videos, trying to rewrite the resume. So I think for a student, that is going to be the other piece you'll get out of this is that you will get more of the tailored resume writing piece from your presentation. If you want, you can talk about what you're going to talk about.
Yeah, definitely. So, I do work with a lot of students, like a lot of students reach out to me and all international mostly. And one issue that everyone faces is okay, they're not getting interview calls. And that is where, when I see their resume, I know like why they are not getting it because there are a lot of keywords which are missing, a lot of projects, I was reading this resume, there was nothing about Quant in that resume. So it's all, like the engineering work, electronics, mechanical, and I said, hey, you won't get any interviews with that kind of resume. So it's very important, let's say any area you are focusing on, let's say I would say any CCRD first, let's say time series modeling, this regression modeling, sometimes volatility model, this all this volatility based models, those becomes very important. So what I'll do is, I'll have certain projects and a lot of keywords which students can add in their resume so that they can which I have tried and tested, and a
Yep.
lot of my juniors have gotten a lot of interviews, bunch of interviews. So I'll share, what kind of keywords to include, what kind of projects, let's say if I pick derivatives, what are, let's say, 2 to 3 projects someone can work on derivatives, and so on in other areas also. So something on those lines, I would say.
Yeah, that'll be great. I think that's another benefit for the students as well is I encourage everybody
Yeah.
to talk to the people at the conference and just ask people that are there, what do you do for a living
Yeah.
and what models do you build?
Right.
Because I think to your point, I was blown away. Somebody asked me like a couple of weeks ago, they're like, Dimitri, I get you teach quant finance and you talk about it, but like, what do you actually model? Right. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, well, everybody models derivatives, but what else do you model? And it
Right.
never really dawned on me, especially with like the speaker list on here, that a lot of people are modeling very different things or using very different approaches.
Right.
And even like simple credit modeling, I'm like, credit modeling is boring, right? Like I do credit modeling every day. And then students ask, and I'm like, well, there's probability of default, there's loss given default, exposure default, there's survival models and hazard modeling, and like start getting through it, and people like students are like amazed at like, wow, I didn't know there's all these different areas. And I think that's kind of to your point here with the resumes. I think often it's hard for students or even practitioners from other industries to link the skills of like what you're actually going to use in
Mhm.
a quant job. So I'm
Right.
hoping that's a benefit. I hope people will actually talk to each other like at the networking event and ask those sorts of questions.
Yep, 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 Dimitri. Yep. So what is this landscape of risk models and equities? Is it about value at risk?
This one is about equity model. It's a risk modeling for equities.
Okay.
Uh, so Arkan Gupta works at Morgan Stanley. He's speaking actually with me on a panel on machine learning explainability at Columbia in like a week and a half. So I'm pretty excited to meet him there. Um, but he's going to kind of explore the multi-factor fundamental modeling. So, everyone does like the factor models with putting the pieces together. I think he's going to go through kind of the risk side of this as well. So I think this is a good point. I always thought factor modeling was dumb just because I think it's overly simplistic and it's OLS and there's a bunch of hand wavy. But I've been reading a bunch of books lately on it more so, and I'm realizing like you can really dig deeper into it and make it more technical and insightful. So I'm actually excited, hoping Arkin here will actually provide kind of more of a bigger picture for that, more depth for that. So I'm actually excited for that because I can learn a little bit too.
Definitely.
Yeah. And then I was going to point out just a few other ones here. David Shimko is going to be there. So professor at NYU, Tandon's program, was in consulting, worked at some of these big banks here. He's going to teach, I believe, if I have it correctly, the most beautiful equation, which is his first lecture. So something I found really interesting was that he's looked at the traditional finance equations that they give you,
Right.
like for example, like CAPM, and his career is so interesting. He worked in finance, PhD in economics. I think then he went and did some consulting and did a bunch of other stuff. And then he came full circle at the end back to academia. And
Mhm.
he realized like all these equations they're teaching aren't great. Like there's too many assumptions, there's too much hand waviness. And so he's teaching valuations at NYU right now, but he teaches it from a quant perspective. And he has a generalized equation that even generalizes it more so that there aren't as many assumptions baked in. So you can actually value a variety of like exotic different types of products. So this is his first lecture, which they actually gives at NYU. And I believe this is the one he's going to be giving um, at this presentation as well.
Okay.
So I think it's going to be an interesting one as well. And then I don't know if he's going to talk about this or not, but he had a way of teaching. the Black-Scholes equation without stochastic calculus application, without going
What?
through that nonsense. Going going through, I believe it's just going through the CAPM, and he does, I think, some simplification of it, but he presented it to Peter Carr a while back, and he was like, "This is the way to teach it to MBA students." Because they can understand like the parts and the theory behind it without having to go through the math. I don't think he's going to be covering that in this presentation, but if you're at the conference, ask him about it. So yeah, it'll be good. I think that's going to be a good one as well. My problem I have at this conference is I'm going to have to pick which ones I go to.
Yeah.
And I always get stopped for selfies and advice, which is awesome. I love that. So if you're at the conference, please do stop me. But it's always hard to pick the right ones and get the schedule all down as well. I'll go through a few of these other ones too, just kind of quickly here. I'm putting together a machine learning panel right now in finance. Um, there's somebody from Dallas. I won't say who right now, but they're going to be on the panel. And then I think I have a couple are hosting the panel. We have a few panelists going to be coming, but I'm still putting that together. As you know, finance is much different than generic machine learning and data science. So talking about those kind of issues, I think is going to be a good, interesting piece of that. I think that's kind of it. That's the full spectrum of the conference here. We have one more track being added in here. Haven't added them yet. I need to just finalize that, but that person will be added. I'm also going to do a keynote at the end on how to bring the quant community together a little bit better. I think kind of touching on what you were asking, like how do students get the most out of this?
Right.
But also how do practitioners get the most out of this? Because I
Yeah.
always kind of viewed it like, I don't know, conferences are okay. Well, it's more like a break though from work
Yeah.
than it is like anything else. And there's always like it's interesting to see people talk, but I never felt like there was like really cutting edge, interesting pieces happening. And
Right.
so part of the planning on this year on the conference was really trying to pick the right people and pick the right topics.
Mm.
And so I'm going to talk a little bit about at the end of the keynote here how to bring all the pieces together and how to get the most out of it. I will also do a little bit of a speech at the beginning on encouraging everybody to network and talk to everyone around you. As an example, I was at Illinois Tech for their conference this last fall. Um, and I gave a presentation on credit risk and why credit risk is so much bigger and better than the buy side. So it's
Right.
kind of like a fun spin-off presentation.
Mhm.
Um, but afterwards, I was talking about securitizations, and I don't know if you've worked on the securitization side of it, but like it's a whole new space for me, and I've been working in it, and I'm doing modeling, and I just casually mentioned it, and a student at the end was like, "Hey, I had an internship on doing securitizations on the business side of it, but I have no idea how the model side works." And so she was asking me about it, and so I was actually really excited in my head, like, "Oh, this student has information I want. Like, I want to talk to her about it." And I think a lot of students should view it that way a little bit more so on like you might have worked in, I don't know, tech or you worked in data science and doing, I don't know, some manufacturing or something not relevant. But I think a lot of people will be surprised when you ask, what have you done? That like there's an interesting dialogue going back and forth. Like people are actually interested in just doing math and modeling, which is like this conference is just math and modeling. It's not supposed to be like, you know, a stuffy conference.
For sure, yeah.
So yeah, so we'll do a networking event at the end as well for about an hour. Uh, I'm also going to do Quant of the Year. So we're going to do that this year. There'll be a Quant of the Year this year. I already know who it's going to be. I'm putting together all the speech and everything for it right now. They have not been notified,
Mhm.
so it'll be a nice surprise when they show up. So
Yeah.
that'll be something different to do. But that's kind of the lineup here. I think, yeah, to your point, right? It's how do you get the most out of this conference? I think that's what I've been struggling with as well. We have a lot of interesting pieces. Um, so, for example, the networking event, we were doing cake pops. So my marketing team always tries to make things like fun
Right.
and exciting. Um, that's going to be a little bit different. The networking piece is going to be different. The careers portion will be different. I think it will add value on the other side to practitioners in the sense that I'm hoping, for example, like on the banking panel or even the machine learning panel, that we can talk more about like how do you validate these or how do you test these?
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's going to get hit too with explainability with a goose who's done all kinds of really cool packages and designs and stuff. So have you ever had him talk about neural networks are nothing more than linear, like spline models, like proportional linear models?
Mm-hmm.
So he's talked about when you do like ReLU as the activation function, it's really just like a bunch of little tiny like linear models all put together,
Okay.
which gives you a much different understanding, I think, of the modeling space.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I think it'll be kind of an interesting insight for even practitioners.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I'm not used to looking at it like that, right? It's like I have a job to do. I build the model, I validate the model, I push the model out the door. So I'm hoping practitioners will actually get some good insights in some of these presentations on kind of new approaches and, kind of tools to use.
Right, right, right. Sure, Dimitri. Also, Dimitri, like I was just curious. So like this presentation, it's does it start exactly at 9, or like do we do like students? Okay, it starts at, okay. So the check-in is at 8. Okay.
Yeah. So kind of 8 to 9-ish, you know, around around there. There'll be a light breakfast. I believe there'll be like croissants and toast and things like that, and like fruit and fresh fruit and all that put out. So you can come park. Your parking's included. I paid for all the parking and the ticket prices and everything for the university. So just come park. We're gonna have big banners up. My marketing team has these big banners that are gonna say be purple that'll look just like the website.
Okay.
We will have parking staff as well that will help guide people
Mhm.
to get around and do all that. I'll send out an email to everybody with the parking pass that you can just like pre-print. I think you have to put it like on your dash or whatever.
Okay.
So that'll be check-in. We'll have a kickoff 9 to 9:30. But yeah, if you want to really get to the presentation part of it, just make sure you're there before 9:30.
Yep.
So that'll be the fun part is that's when things will really start kicking off there. We will have a selfie wall. So I'm trying to think of how to explain this. There's the auditorium and then there's two classes down the hall, but there's a big atrium we're going to have open for check-in. And then we're going to have a bunch of tables set up for networking. I
Mm-hmm.
can almost guarantee that during all the presentations, there will be people in the atrium just chatting and networking. Every conference I have gone to, I am typically not in the presentations. I'm typically networking with all the different students and the practitioners and meeting new people in the atrium. So I would encourage you guys to like, even if there's a slot on here and you're like, oh, none of these sound interesting, that'll be a good time to meet other people and chat. And then we will have the selfie wall. I'm hoping we can get it all set up with like the awesome Quant logos all over the back and the branding and the marketing.
I,
So
I'm personally really excited for the conference. To be honest, really excited. Yeah.
who are you most excited to see?
So to be honest, Agus is someone, I'm following him on LinkedIn. So I see a lot of his posts on machine learning. So I'm really excited to meet him. Really excited.
Okay. Yeah, I'm hoping we can use the selfie wall. Because
Yeah.
to your point, like I went to the Cornell conference, oh man, at the end of last year, and I was like a panelist or whatever, which is fine. And Igor Halperin is there. And he has a book. He works at Fidelity, and it's on reinforcement learning for like portfolio optimization and inverse reinforcement learning. So when I went to the conference, I was so excited to meet him, and somebody I knew him. And I'm like, I'm one of the panelists. Like, I shouldn't be like, embarrassed to say anything. But I was like, can you introduce me? So she introduced me to him real quick. And to the same point, right? I follow him on LinkedIn, and I see all of his posts, and I read his book, and so I'm like really excited to meet him. So I'm hoping we have the same thing for this conference. I'm hoping people will get selfies because even last year, we had, I won't name them, but they were presenting on um, quantum mechanics and finance.
Whoa.
So physics PhD, the guy was super brilliant, amazing presentation. Like tons of people said the feedback was great. And then like at the thing, he's like, "Hey, do you mind if we get a selfie?" And I was so surprised, right? Because I'm like, I feel like it'd be the other way around of like, I'm excited to meet you because you're an expert in this space. But it's always fun to kind of see that people recognize like the YouTube channel and the podcasts.
Yeah.
So,
I guess I started my YouTube journey because of you. So because I mean, you were the only creator in the space. I mean that everyone followed, and I was like, at least, I should follow Dimitri and, just, because I always loved helping students, and I was like, okay, let me also start something like this. So to be honest, like I saw your YouTube community and that's where I started mine. So, so
Yeah. We'll have to get a picture with us and with us and Patrick Zorro,
yep, yeah, for
since we
sure.
all kind of bounce on each other's podcasts and channels.
Right, right.
But have you been to a students conference in the last few years?
No, no, this is my first conference, to be honest.
Okay, this is gonna be good. I,
Yeah.
I don't think you'll unexpect it. It's weird. My guess is that a bunch of people will recognize you.
Really? Okay.
So UTD has a lot of students that are interested in quantitative finance.
Mhm.
Um, and I guess is they probably watch your channel as well. So
Okay.
so it's always fun because like I went to another conference and somebody's like, why is everyone taking pictures with Dimitri? Like this is an odd thing. And somebody's like, he's a YouTuber, he has a channel. It's a whole thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, the selfie part I think will be fun. I think you'll be good. I've finally gotten recognition now. My last trip, I two people in New York recognized me
Oh, really?
and
Wow.
stopped and asked me. Just random people. One was at the airport and one was at a bus stop.
Wow. That's amazing.
Because you don't expect it, right? I mean, we're just like it's quant finance. Like we're not like, I don't know, like a big YouTuber like Casey Neistat or like Beast or someone. We're just like smaller YouTube channels that do quant finance.
Yeah. But Dimitri, like everyone knows you, at least in India, everyone knows you really well.
Really?
Yeah, they follow your content really. I mean, everyone knows. So even if someone asks you, hey, I wanted this advice in quant finance, so everyone is like, hey, watch Dimitri's channel. He's like the go-to person. So, and this was the advice which was given to me also. Back in, and this was back in 2019, I would say. So
Okay.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I'm hoping this conference is kind of like that effect where I think there's a lot of really good people on here. Like yourself, for example, like you've been on my podcast and you've been on my channel and we've talked and had interviews. So
uh-huh.
I'm hoping a lot of people that watch the channel are like, this is a great opportunity to meet, like, to meet you and to meet David Shimko, and to meet Zach Cretan and to meet Christina Chi. Like they've all been on the podcast. Patrick Zorro's been on the podcast. So I hope it's one of those, it should be, almost guarantee people it will be a fun time just because I think there's so many people that I've brought in that are also pretty just friendly. We're used to talking on YouTube channels and podcasts or professors. So I think it'll be a pretty good opportunity to network. Where when I've been to other conferences, often it's like CEOs or hedge fund managers, and even myself, I'm always the guy that's like in like the back corner that's like just like, well, why did I come to this conference? Am I really going to get anything out of it?
Right. That's true. That's true.
So it should be fun. I hope people do come. I think we're at 40 ticket sales now for the general public and students. Like I said, I am hand emailing PhD students now in the Texas area, trying to get people to come to see different career paths.
Right.
Um, I've got probably 20 to 25 practitioners who have said they're interested in attending, but they need to check their schedules. So my guess is like the 2 weeks before ticket sales will really spike on that.
Yeah.
And right now, I think it's like 60% industry practitioners and 40% students.
Wow. That's a good mix, I would
So
say.
yeah, which surprised me because UTD is doing marketing on their end. So I was kind of worried like, hey, it's going to just be like this big UTD conference.
Right.
And then I think we have like somebody messaged me. There's a student I think coming from Stevens Institute of Technology out of New Jersey. They're already flying out and they're going to come to the conference. There were some students out of UC, I think University of California, San Diego
Mhm.
that might be coming. Um, and then like even when I had the coffee meetup, like, hey, just meet me at the Starbucks. We had a few people that drove from Austin, Texas down.
Yeah.
Um, Even on the speaker list, like almost no one's from Dallas.
Yeah. I guess I'm
Right.
flying to Dallas. Yep. Yep.
Yeah. So it should be an interesting mix. I think it'll be a lot of fun here, but I'm pretty excited to kind of throw the second one, or the second official one here. But yeah, that's kind of the wrap up on this. This is kind of what we're doing, and I think that's why students should go and why practitioners should go.
No, definitely. I feel definitely it would be good, really good, at least for both like the student community and working professionals to understand like different areas of quant finance, what are certain advancement. A lot of times I feel like there's a lot of advancement happening in the industry side, but coming to academia, people and students are not aware. So I guess that would open a lot of gates for students to understand, okay, what's some certain projects they can work on, which is happening in the industry. So at least I'm really excited for the conference.
Yeah, I think it'll be a lot of fun. I think the speakers will get a lot out of it just because it's like we're all pretty excited. And I think we all know parts of each other, but I think it'll be fun to get the big group together. And then I think it'll be a great opportunity just to network and meet people there and have a lot of fun.
Right, right. So any last advice, Dimitri, or anything you want to say, or anything on those lines?
That's a good question. I I guess the sales pitch I had for this, which I still kind of stand by, I think this will probably be one of the best conferences in the sense of the diversified topics,
Mhm.
but also I think the cost wise, I think it's very rare to be able to attend a conference with these sorts of presenters, this sort of talent, and do it for so cheap. So when I have to do New York presentations, the thing that kills me every time is the hotel. I
Yeah.
always get like flights and I'm like, oh, 250, 300, I can fly like economy. It's gonna be a cheap conference. And then I pay 350 usually for a ticket to go to a conference. And then the hotels are usually like 200 to 300 a night. And
Right.
I'm just trying to stay like lower end generic hotels, like a Best Western or something in New York City. But then the tax on top of that's like an extra $100,
Yep. Yep. I agree. Yeah.
which just blows. I mean, I stayed, I think, in Long Island City, and I stayed right next to the projects, like the ghetto last time, just trying to save a few extra dollars. So I think this will be a much better experience in the sense that Dallas is a lot cheaper. And so I am hoping that we can bring together more of the quant community for a lot less money. And also the whole West Coast, right? I mean, when you think about conferences, it's typically in New York or Chicago. But I do think this will be a great opportunity for anyone who is not on the West Coast or on the East Coast, but also if you're looking in quant finance, but you're not wanting to work in New York City, right? I think it's hard to land a job like in Denver,
Right.
right? Like, I mean, because you're in Denver, aren't you?
Yep. That's right. Yeah.
And there's not that many banks in Denver.
No, not really. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it'll be a good chance for I think people to kind of see what it's like to work in different areas. Just because Dallas is kind of this weird back office hub where most of the quant jobs have been moved from New York and New Jersey and actually been, exported out to Dallas. So I think it'd be kind of an interesting conference just in that kind of perspective as well.
Right, right. I mean, at least like I feel like because for students, I mean, I understand $30 at least. If you compare like other conferences, they are really expensive. So I would say like $30 is still cheap for students. I mean, to attend this, and I guess learn a lot. I mean, one full day it's like complete. You learn a lot about all different sectors in the quant space. So definitely, yeah.
Yeah,
I encourage all students and professionals to definitely attend it.
especially if you're in Texas.
Yeah.
There's no other quant conference here. I've never seen one. Dallas, Houston, Austin.
Yeah, definitely. Sure.
So,
Dimitri.
yeah, awesome. Well, thanks for having me on.
Thanks, Dimitri, for joining in, and thank you so much for presenting this to the viewers. And I hope like I get this podcast published soon on the YouTube channel. Thank
Awesome. Thank you.
you so much.